What is up, guys? It's the Sound Alchemist, part of One Mind Syndicate, and today I'm back to talk about Warhammer 40k. So, if you guys remember, I mentioned that I'm going to start a Primaris Iron Hands chapter, and today I want to keep those juices flowing, or I guess get those gears grinding, because today I'm going to be talking about how Ferrus Manus is basically making his chapter become an unstoppable crushing force against anybody that would oppose them. Now this comes from their novel Ferrus Manus, the Gorgon of Medusa, which is one of the Primarch novels, and it gives you an insight into who Ferrus Manus actually is. So without further ado, guys, let's go ahead and let's dive into this novelization. What is now past was your war. What now commences shall be mine. There will be no feast of celebration, no proclamation of victory. I do not claim worlds, I conquer them. My victories are their own proclamation. I will present my brother Guilliman with ash around a barren star. That shall be my proclamation. And the Cardinal shall forever be remembered only for the manner in which they fell. His gaze passes over his warriors, silent before in his scorn, for what they had just witnessed was not a contest. It was a lesson. I have sought to lead as Fulgrim or Guilliman would have led, but that is not my way. It is not the Medusan way. The Cardinal have had ample opportunity to yield. Grumbles of agreement swept across the hall. Arcaduana swayed on the spot, blinking up at the Primarch, and it fell to Caesarius to speak out. The Emperor desired these worlds intact. The Cardinal rule over 11 worlds. I will give my father 10. No one had wanted a war. No one had seen war until now. For one day, Cardinal Prime turned like meat on a spit under the guns of the Iron Hands fleet. Ship augurs saw panic spread, ripples of red. The unusual inconsistencies of biosignatures read enhanced to precision sharpness by the compound effect of sheer volume. The astropaths felt it, and more viscerally than those on the command deck, watching their screams run red. The ritually blinded psychers clawed at the padded walls of their sanctums, their mental defenses overwhelmed by hellish visions. The earth split, the sky fell, billions screamed into the night, but there would be no keeping ahead of this dawn. The warships of the Iron Tenth did not move. There was no need. The planet obliged, presenting new targets for obliteration as quickly as they could reload and recharge. Land strikes demolished hab towers and militia fortresses without distinction. Macro ordinances pulverized districts, fracturing the rockcrete fused crusts, revivifying extinct geologies for one dying surge of volcanism. Cities collapsed into earth, and they slipped into rivers of lava. Cardinal Prime was not the first world to be scoured of a reluctant populace in the Emperor's name, but it was the first where this was meted out with such calculated brutality. It was punishment, scaled towards the far end of an infinite series beyond mere collective. No genocide perpetrated by the warhounds had ever been so severe, or so total. After one complete revolution, it ceased. What had been a pole-to-pole spread of human habitation, home to hundreds of billions, had become a steaming sphere of magmic red and twisted steel. The creaks and groans of the devastated planetary megalopolis reverberated silently through the void, relayed like the moans of the undead through the spectral augurs and geographs of the Iron Hands in orbit. Only one narrow line of latitude remained unbroken, a complex of linked fortifications well sited in a zone of tectonic stability within the capitals and heavily void-shielded still stood, albeit now surrounded by a moat of lava and 100 meters of wide. It could have been hit again until the ground beneath it crumbled. The planet could have been virus-bombed or had its atmosphere purged. It was what Perturabo might have done. What was war, if not for a demonstration of strength? Ferrus would look the Cardinal in the eye as the life left them. He would see the moment they realized they had always been weak, and war was what they were getting. The Iron Hands were the masters of coordinated combined arms warfare. Only one who had ever seen one of their ruthlessly orchestrated set-pieces engagement in close quarters could ever dispute it. The commander of any other force would have ordered their artillery to cease bombardment the moment that the ground forces came within reach of the walls. But this legion knew their guns. They knew how far minimum safe distance could be pushed to its limits. Earthshaker and Medusa shells hammered into the Cardinal's wall, even as the breacher and assault units of the Ultramarines chapter commenced their attack. After 3 hours and 16 minutes of relentless bombardment, as the Imperial onslaught drove the numerically superior Cardinal forces from their perimeter defenses, there was barely a wall left. With the last stalwarts of the Cardinal fully engaged by the might of the 4 legions and the god machines of the Legio Ataris, Ferrus Manus delivered one final demonstration of contempt. It was overkill of the highest order, but the compliance of Cardinal Prime has ceased to be a military operation and had become an object of political lesson. Not for the Cardinal, of course. Their last chance to draw anything from their first reunion with the Imperium of Man had expired with the arrival of Ferrus Manus. This was for everyone else. With an apocalyptic crack of thunder, a blast of overpressure turned Rockcrete to explosive blooms of powder and flattening anything lighter than a power-armored space marine. Dominated by light infantry, the Cardinal were decimated. The effect of the Imperial army was comparable. The Primarch of the Iron Tenth was not given the introspection or self-doubt, the endless cycles of codification and reanalysis that must have occupied Guilliman's every moment held no interest for him. Neither did he possess the patience for the moral quandaries that Vulcan or Corax, or even Fulgrim, indulged prior to a campaign to restore a reluctant diaspora to the Terran fold. There was only one way to wage war, and that was to do it totally, with every tool and weapon at his disposal, employed to their absolute. This was his way. The ancient lords of the Cardinal, massive in their mortuary warplate, sought to marshal the retreat, but Ferrus Manus bestrode their world like a colossus. Every blow of his hammer left crab walkers crippled and war machines hemorrhaging smoke from their ruins. Bullets ricocheted harmlessly off of his armor. Beams bent and blades turned against his flesh. Men died unnamed and uncounted, for he was war at its most brutal. No voice cheered him, for few welcomed the coming of war, but his towering presence drew vigor from the spent muscles of his allies, and tore down the fog of evolutionary selection and drugs that have blinded the Cardinal to fear. Ferrus lifted his hammer aloft and roared for retribution, as Duquesne, Caesarius, and Demeter all discovered a last reserve of strength to see his will done. This world would be uninhabitable for centuries, but he was not mankind's liberator. He was their conqueror. And there you have it, guys. This Primarch novel really shows you the brutality of Ferrus Manus, and unfortunately his life was cut short since he was the first Primarch to fall at the hands of another Primarch at the beginnings of the Horus Heresy, and because of that, we don't really see much of his character flesh out besides this Primarch novel. Now, that's not to say that because of this it ruins the character or it ruins his chapter. I think it's quite on the contrary. Because we get so little, we see the inferences of his Space Marines and how they took his mantra of just being brute force over everything, which then kind of evolved into the flesh being weak, and how that has sent ripples throughout the Iron Hands ever since his death, and how they choose to replace their body parts with bionics, or even in more recent lore, kind of turn around to their old thoughts and teachings and kind of embrace the human side of the Space Marine. It's really interesting to see how that plays out in the interpersonal relationships between the Space Marines themselves of the chapter, their successors, and against others. It's very interesting because I feel like we don't really get that with anything else. Now, of course, we do have the Blood Angels who also lost their who also lost their Primarch, but I feel like that's vastly different than how we see the Iron Hands. So if you guys have any other lore you wish me to cover with the Iron Hands, let me know, because again, I feel like this is just fueling the wargamer in me to create more interesting characters on the tabletop, which I feel like I'm already going to go crazy with the conversions because I want it to be a fully Gravis army, which means I can play around with a lot of models because there are a ton of Gravis Primaris out there. So I'll show you guys that end result when I get there. But for now, that's all I got for today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, this has been the Sound Alchemist, part of One Mind Syndicate, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next one. Peace.